On tonight's edition of the CHGO Cubs related podcast, Shota Imanaga is back, how that affects the Cubs budget, their offseason plans. We'll talk pitching free agent rumors, offensive projections, and more on tonight's edition of the CHGO Cubs related podcast. This is the CHGO Cubs related podcast driven by Toyota. Let's go places. Good evening, everyone. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan. We are coming to you on Thursday. It is November 20th. Brendan, we missed you last week. Good to have you back.
I'm back. 100 more days until opening day for spring training. 100 more days. That's all we have.
In case you're counting.
I'm counting, man.
And yes, we have plenty to talk about in this episode. And I think primarily there's just nothing more that gets the people going, Brendan, than talking about the Cubs finances, baby.
That's right. And hypothetical trades, hypothetical signings that ultimately never end up happening.
Yes. Plenty to talk about. We'll talk about Shota Imanaga accepting his qualifying offer. He will be back with the Cubs, the implications of that, some of the discussions around that. Obviously, I see our guy Joey in the chat. Him and Luke and Justin have talked about that throughout the week, but we like to offer our opinion as well. We'll talk about some of the other pitching rumors that are going around. Jared and I talked about some last week, but more this week. And then we'll take a look at, on the offensive side, obviously Kyle Tucker declining his qualifying offer. Not a lot of confidence at all that there's any reunion happening there. So we'll talk about what that looks like. And I think continue on the line of, not necessarily line of thinking, but the idea that maybe this front office spends most of their remaining budget to strengthen the pitching staff. Do they look at significant offensive additions, small offensive additions to sort of round things out, and just kind of squaring that whole thing? But Brendan, I think the first thing to talk about is Shota coming back. I think some of the conversation a little weird. I'll start by saying I don't buy about Shota. There's some reports out there, and I've seen some radio discussions suggesting the Cubs front office was stunned or caught flat-footed on this, and it messes up their plans and stuff. And I've seen a lot of people use this phrase, but doesn't pass the sniff test, folks. It was very reasonable to think that Shota was going to accept this. It makes a lot of sense on a few levels.
You're telling me the OCD manager, Craig Counsell, and the ultra OCD president of baseball ops, Jed Hoyer, were shocked that the $22 million offer was accepted that they gave out. The same guys who talk about having plan D, E, F, G, H, every letter of the alphabet, they were shocked.
And it, just a strange, it's not coming from a lot of circles, but just a strange one that, doesn't really, they maybe hoped he declined it. They maybe were thinking maybe he would decline it, but stunned was a word I saw you. No chance. Sorry. Not to defer to authority. The front office makes mistakes. They all make mistakes. They're all capable of, hey, we gambled on the wrong prospect, or we signed a reliever and he stinks, or we made this trade. But this would represent the front office being like super like dumb to not have a better word to use. So I don't buy it. They maybe were hoping he didn't take it, but
but it's a net positive. When you make the qualifying offer, you may have two outcomes, and either way, they're good with that outcome. That is,
you're not doing it unless you are certain he's
Right.
going to decline it, like in the case of Kyle Tucker, which you also
Right.
would have been thrilled if he took that. So
That's my
yeah, it
point.
just
So you have
wasn't.
two outcomes.
There was a lot of reason for Shota to accept it. Maybe he could have gotten a longer term deal, but if there is a work stoppage, only having the 1-year deal would allow him to play in Japan if he wanted. If there was a work stoppage, 22 million, probably more than he was going to get on an annual basis, even if he did get a multi-year deal. So the idea that the front office was like, what? Like, I don't buy that, frankly. Maybe they didn't want it, but if they were stunned by that, we have bigger problems, and it doesn't align with anything else we've seen from this front office. But Brendan, I think the only thing that was certain with this whole process was that the Cubs would not opt into the 3-year club option that they had.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I think anything was on the table. And as I've said since the beginning, I think there's worse things than having Shota on this team. You went through a couple weeks ago a lot of the stuff that happened to him in the second half with his mechanics, his repertoire, likely as a result of coming back from that injury, and some hope that there's ways to fix that, or at least get some of that back into working order for next year. But you need the pitching depth. Shota has a relatively high ceiling. And especially, you compare him to some of these guys we're talking about free agency. It's not like some of those guys blow his numbers out of the water. And I think, as we've said since the beginning, the only way this is a problem is if they act like they don't have any money, and 1 year of Shota Imanaga is a significant chunk of their offseason spending. Otherwise, this is a solid move and adds to depth that, as we keep pointing out, last year being a good example, you often need and often gets tested fairly relentlessly.
Right. My idea was, if you don't bring Shota back, if he declines a qualifying offer, I would have liked 2 guys to come back as a result. So Shota comes back. I still want 1 guy, right? And that's still possible. Shota comes back at 22 million. You do all the different back of the napkin calculations. You arrive at the value of $50 million below that first tier of the luxury tax. If they operate how they've operated every year in our lifetimes, essentially underneath the Theo regime and Jed, they're probably going to approach a threshold of around 10 million, 15 million before that first tier. That means they're projected, based on past years, to spend around $40 million if the year is normal like the past few years. If that's the case, a lot of pitchers you and I want should be on the table. And frankly, we've heard they are on the table. It's not as if bringing back Shota for 1 year will prohibit those names being discussed.
Well, and that was part of the reason that, I never bought it in the beginning, but even pushing back on the sort of the Cubs are stunned. Like a lot of the more connected beat writers, even today on Thursday, are still talking about Michael King or Dylan Cease or Tatsuya Imai. Like they're not operating as though this has changed much. So
And so if Shota did not come back and declined it, I would have liked you go out, you get like Michael King and Dylan Cease, right? You want to be greedy about that. Now, of course,
just recreate the 2025 Padres if you can.
We can do that. That the Cubs beat, by the way.
Right.
But him coming back at 1 year 22, it leaves him flexible for future years. They may be more willing to spend larger money for more years because you have now 1 year shored up. You don't know what the next domino will be. And for all we know, this was the preferred path forward for the Cubs. Maybe they did want to have this flexibility come 2027, 2028. You have more room to make those longer term contracts.
Yeah, I mean, potentially, and then figure out what your big swing is, right? Whether that is someone like Dylan Cease, Michael King, Framber Valdez, guys that are out there. Am I from Japan, maybe swinging one of those trades that we've, continued hearing about for the past couple of years? Perhaps it is aligned with their plans. Like I was listening to our friends on the Bleacher Nation Cubs podcast this afternoon. Like there was always kind of this thinking that they would go after probably 2 pitchers in the rotation this offseason. Is it their preferred plan that Shota is one of them? I don't know. It's not mine.
I think the word preferred plan is kind of loaded. They made the decision to offer Shota a qualifying offer.
Yeah.
They preferred to make that decision.
Yes.
I have a lot of preferred plans as well. It doesn't mean that plan A versus plan B versus plan C are all bad. I would have taken all those 3 plans.
Sure.
So this was one of the plans they like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it does seem to leave them with, you can still figure out what your big swing is in the rotation. And as we talked about, this rotation has a lot of questions as it stands right now without a further addition. But if you can get to a point next year, once Justin Steele is back, and if you do end up in a situation where you have a healthy Justin Steele, a healthy Cade Horton, Matthew Boyd coming back, figuring out Shota, and hopefully healthy after an offseason of work, Jamison Tyone, your depth guys like Javi Assad, etc. It's a strong group. I mean, if some of those guys are your 3 through 5 in the rotation, and you throw someone like Dylan Cease or Michael King, these names we're going to talk about further in this episode, it's a strong group. I think you'd look at that group, certainly a lot of question marks. We talked about the health of some of these guys, not seeing them go from April to November and be healthy or at full form. So those questions would still exist. But when you look at the 1 through 5 of a lot of teams in this league, I think you'd be hard pressed to say that that group wasn't on a full spectrum, maybe not ceiling wise, like certainly up there with the better groups across the league. Again, if everything goes well, guys are healthy, but who doesn't have those question marks, right?
It feels like the Cubs have a high floor in terms of pitching and batting, but even pitching too. You look at someone like Tyone, Shota coming back. You have Matthew Boyd, right? So you do have, in a bad case outcome, if they're not going to take that next step, well, you have that floor established, even if Steele is unable to come back and provide value right away. Now, where I want as a fan to improve is you extend that range and you push forward that ceiling. That comes in the form of you and I talking about Cease, King, Amai, like all of these potential really attractive pitchers that we hope the Cubs engage in free agency.
Yeah, I mean, look, like ultimately, if you end up in a situation, and you know, these guys on the market have their own questions, right? Like Imai's coming over from a different league. Cease has extreme variability in some years between
Michael
his ERA,
King
his
as
FIP,
well.
King, etc. Some of these guys have had injury histories. Like you can ask these questions about anybody, but if you end up in a place where it's something like your 1 through 3 is what at a point, say in July, like Michael King, Justin Steele, and Cade Horton, with those other guys being your back end, like that sounds pretty good to me. Maybe it's not the best rotation in the league, but it sounds like a very strong group.
And the likelihood is that's not going to happen, not in a bad way, because you have so many options available. We're talking about even having someone like, Jackson Wiggins take the
haven't
next
even
step.
mentioned him. Yeah, right.
Cade Horton was not in my front view mirror last offseason because he was injured, and I thought they would slowly ramp him up. So as long as you spread apart your possibilities and you have a high floor, I'm comfortable going into the season playing those cards. It's where once you start seeing the rotation iron out in the first few months, hopefully this go around, unlike last go around, you improve at the deadline. You make that splash, you extend your ceiling, and you hope that once you do get into an elimination game, you don't have to skip on Shota. Yeah. You don't have to throw Colin Ray in the 4th inning and give up home runs that ultimately cost you, the game. So that's where I hope this front office extends that ceiling, is where I think they can financially do that, which gives me optimism as well.
Yeah. And we'll talk about like the rest of the spending. You already mentioned kind of that luxury tax threshold, how much they might play with if they are beholden to that once again. But overall, I think like, the feeling on Shota is, yes, there's some questions after that second half, but hopefully, and if you're offering the qualifying offer, I'm, certainly hoping that you have a plan to get him back to health and figure some of that out, right? I think the only issue rotation wise would be if you stopped there. Like, that is not good enough. You have to go and add that other piece.
Well, I have a few thoughts in rotation. Let's do the ad break here. I want to get your thoughts on Shota as well, but let's do the ad break. We'll come back. We'll continue talking about this.
Sounds good.
Toyotathon is on. Get your Toyota while the getting's good. Score value on the versatile RAV4. It's America's #1 selling vehicle. Or ride with Tacoma, our rugged weekend warrior, or hit the road with Camrys available all-wheel drive. Red Hot savings are ready for you at Toyotathon, so visit your Toyota dealer today. Toyota, let's go places. And RAV4 sales claim based on manufacturer sales data for 2024. Also, become a CHGO diehard. Upgrade your fandom today. Chicago has all good sports teams. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, not the White Sox, but hopefully, you never know. Get access to our exclusive written content. You can read all about our good team. Sorry, Sean, that was not a dig at you. You can get free t-shirts, plenty of discounts on future merch and events, plus access to that exclusive CHGO Discord lounge where we all hang out and talk Chicago sports and so much more. Go to allchgo.com for all this information, and we cannot wait to connect with you on an ever greater level. Winter is here, or it's coming. It feels like it's here. There was a blizzard in Chicago last week. Is your home's heating ready for that challenge? And if you got a plumbing emergency, guess what? Call Four Seasons. An electrical emergency, call Four Seasons. You need a new hot water tank installed today? You already know who to call. Now is the perfect time to schedule your Four Seasons furnace tune-up. And if you've been thinking about a whole home generator, they've got you covered there too. Four Seasons guarantees same-day installation for all your heating, cooling, plumbing, electrical, and generator needs with no extra charge for nights, weekends, or holidays. You can save up to $4,000 on furnaces and comfort systems with Four Seasons heating, air conditioning, plumbing, and electric. Your trusted local experts are Four Seasons Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric. Visit fourseasonsheatingcooling.com for special offers and money-saving coupons. That's fourseasonsheatingcooling.com.
All right, Brendan, back with you. Shout out to Barb in our live YouTube chat. Longtime listener. We are live as I'm responding to these messages. And Brendan does have a chart for you today. For anybody waiting for a Brendan graph, we do have a chart, at least one that I know of. Okay. What were you were going to ask me something about the rotation before our break.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the rotation, I think there's two conflicting thoughts. The first thought is, well, you have so many guys, so that must be good. I mean, we're listing off 7 starters: Cade Horton, Justice Steele when healthy, Matthew Boyd, Jamison Tyone, Shota Imanaga, Colin Ray. You have this huge group of guys, but at the same time, the other conflict is, well, it doesn't feel like it's enough. And so where I think there's trepidation is we're not excited about that ceiling. But at the same time, I don't want that floor to be escaped as well. Because when you do have 7 guys who we're talking about elevate and provide those innings, it doesn't feel as far-fetched. I think this starting pitching rotation is in good shape as it stands now, assuming you make that next move. So I do feel like it's in good shape. I don't think you need substantial improvements, but I do think just 1 or 2 improvements really can push that next level for this team.
Yeah, and I think like it's also trying to think forward and avoid kind of what happened to you in 2025, where you had guys get hurt, you had guys kind of run out of gas, and just anticipating you can't always prepare for injuries. Yeah. And I'm certainly not suggesting that Justin Steele is injury prone, but it has happened multiple times. Cade Horton, a freak thing at the end of the year. These things just happen. You have to anticipate that. And then when you're dealing with a couple guys who are in their mid 30s, like at least anticipating, not expecting, not guaranteeing that if they do make 25 to 30 starts throughout the year, maybe they're not going to be super efficient or fresh or at their peak come October. So it's just anticipating that may happen, especially when you look at this group and like it does seem a reasonable thought for basically everybody in this rotation.
And you can still fill out starters. I've seen discussion, and it's fair, granted, but the discussion is, well, what about those 7 guys we just talked about? They're on 1-year expiring contracts. I love Tyone, but if there's room for improvement, it's 1 year. I like Matthew Boyd. He has 1 year left. Shota Imanaga, 1 year left.
Yeah.
If there's room to improve, then the risk of saying, oh, well, we got to take starts away from Jameson Tyone or Shota, well, they may not be there next year. And they have this money to do it. So I do feel as if there's flexibility to be gained, even though right now it may seem inflexible, but I don't think that's the case with these 1 year deals.
Okay, so I talked with Jared last week about several, guys that are on the market or that we've heard, rumors, things like that. When you look at the group, and again, projecting, hopefully things go right. Justin Steele's back. He looks like himself, top of the rotation guy. Cade Horton comes back, picks up where he left off on his near rookie of the year campaign, et cetera, et cetera. Which of these guys do you feel like complements this group the best? Or is the person who analyzes pitching more than anyone I know, would you say, I'm really into this? Like now I'm pumped about this rotation if they go and add this guy.
Yeah, the well-roundedness of stuff in a rotation, I don't know if there's meaningful signal there to say, oh, well, because we have a bunch of soft throwers, we need that 98 mile per hour guy. I don't know if I really buy that. You can say, oh, in a small sample, then you have to, diversify yourself. I don't really think that's the case. So when I look at these pitchers, I'm not looking at diversifying the rotation. I'm looking for the best guy.
Sure. Fine.
Which guy stands out? I am interested in bringing back Cease. I've talked about Cease a few times now. I know we have a posted, and he is younger and has electric stuff, and I love him too. And it's not to contrast the two exactly, but what I like about Cease is that he has a really strong base in that fastball. And what I mean by that is when you model his fastball, it has a lot of carry on it, doesn't have much tail, and it has velocity. There's not much room for debate on the value of that pitch. When you look at Amai, he's a really strong fastball too, where you can squint and think, okay, well, where can this go wrong? And that's where you start thinking worst case scenario. With him is, well, he has a lot of run on his fastball, right? So if he loses a little bit of carry or the velo's not there, to me, there's more room for error there. And then you're relying on that splitter, which is nasty, by the way. But it becomes a discussion that we've had in years past where how reliable are those pitch types? And when it's off just a little bit, what is the floor? What is the negative? And for Shota, we know what that was. It's not to compare him to Amai here, but what I want to really emphasize is that for Cease, that four-seam fastball, you know what you're going to get from it. Then he has that slider, you know what you're going to get from it. Where Cease has to grow, perhaps, is getting that third pitch. But at least I know if you sign Cease, you're going to get 30 starts, you're going to get major league experience, you're going to get comfort on the day-to-day lifestyle of being a big leaguer, and you're going to get a four-seam fastball and a slider that is stable, projectable because he's done it. And for me right now, I'm willing to spend more money on that because I like that certainty. I like Amai. I would be ecstatic if we signed him, but I really like that certainty and that foundation that Cease offers.
Okay. Any of the guys give you pause? Like Jared and I talked last week, about the cross-up thing with Fromber and what to make of that. But we don't know too much about that, and you kind of have to defer to the front office. They're pretty careful about some of the character stuff most of the time. I think they would pay attention to that. Like if they felt there was an issue, like this clubhouse has felt pretty tight knit. We talked last week too about how most of the discussion last year was the fruitful relationships in the clubhouse, like what Boyd was bringing, what Justin Turner was bringing, what that impact was on some of the younger players. So you kind of have to trust them there. But in terms of their stuff or how they might age or what that contract might look like, any of the names being discussed relative to the Cubs give you any pause or where you would be like, oh man, that's not the move I want them to make?
Framber has a profile that's not going to give you the whiffs. I'm a guy who likes whiffs, who values those whiffs, but at the same time, Framber doesn't do sweet contact. He's not going to walk that many guys. the stuff with the clubhouse, like you said, I don't know what to make of that. I've watched out cross up a few times. I can see both ways. I'm not thrilled about the potential reality that did happen, but I'm not thinking necessarily about Framber. He's not in my top desirable outcomes. I would say the top three would be number 1, Cease, number 2, Amai, and number 3, Michael King. I would like to have at least one of those guys. I think realistically, if you want to think, I don't want to call it pessimistic because I like those guys, but it does feel as if Michael King's more of the reality given how the Cubs have spent money over the years. And if that's the case, I'm fine with it. I do believe, though, if you sign King, you still leave yourself susceptible to having a necessity to improve at the deadline. That if you get Cease, I think that's more certain they're going to get value that way.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, what about you?
I mean, we talked last week. I mean, and this is where like I do defer to you because you dig into this stuff more than I do, but I do kind of like the idea of changing things up, like with someone like Amai and bringing more velocity and just diversifying the look of this rotation. But I do understand, we've watched a lot of guys be successful in this Cubs rotation, not pumping gas. And look, I like the idea of Hottovy, Zombro, all these guys in the Cubs, pitching infrastructure having a chance to play around with Dylan Cease and see if they can continue like unlocking some stuff in him and taking him to that next level.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, like I think I would be comfortable if they add someone in this group. I think, again, like the only thing that would give me pause is if they bring Shota back and they don't continue to add to this rotation.
They're going to add to the rotation.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I like all of these names. I mean, there's a possibility that maybe they use some of the prospects and I don't know, maybe they pick up the phone and talk to the Marlins again about some of those guys.
I gotta be honest with you, in terms of the other options available, I'm just not interested in that as a priority. If the options start falling off the table and they have to do that, I can get on board with it, but that's definitely not my top 3, desires to go after at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would be thrilled with any of the 3 guys that you listed in your top 3. I think, range of outcomes and how excited you would be, or if you feel like they added like a true like ace, like I think that's all going to be some fairly subjective stuff.
So let's say money's equal, and it probably is not going to be equal. Let's say money is equal. Cease or Amai?
I'd probably defer to Cease. Yeah, I think just for the reasons you said, like obviously you're just removing that kind of transition risk. And, we've obviously seen a lot of guys have success with that. So I don't know how much weight you want to put into that. But I think if you can remove that risk, I think it's something that you'd like. And obviously, Cease has some starts where the innings are lower because he throws a lot of pitches if his command isn't great, stuff like that. But, I think adding a guy to this rotation that you can pretty safely bank on making 30 starts, like when we talk about kind of what happened last year and ways to improve upon that and put them in a better position, like that does feel like a really strong way to do that.
Who do you think is more likely to have the highest value in terms of, let's say, WAR, Fangraphs WAR in 5 years? Cease or Amai?
That feels like potentially Amai.
Okay.
To me.
I mean, and I think,
but I do think there's some like inherent biases there, right? Because like you've seen Cease at the MLB level and there's been some inconsistency there. So I don't want to like defer too much. The unknown of Amai coming over works both ways, right? There's a potential transition and like, how does this stuff play? Like he's a guy that peppers the zone. Does he have to adjust that at all as he comes over? Like, how does the stuff play? Things like that, as you mentioned. And then it's also in that same way easy to extrapolate it like, well, he's coming over with this power stuff, like he could be the best. Right. So I think there's some inherent biases at work there.
I think more on a shorter term timeline. Okay. So I see
which is probably what the Cubs should be doing.
But they don't. But that's a whole other discussion, right? They think on 5-year windows, and I understand that. But I think on a short 2-year timeline.
Well,
So the question I
2032
asked,
is in 7 years. So Carter thinks in
he'll never let that go, poor guy.
no.
Did it
I
to
wonder if he
himself.
thought that like right after he said it. He's like, oh, they're never gonna stop talking about that. He's like, I picked a random year. They're never gonna let me live that down.
But with this Cubs team, you have guys aligning. You have, for the same reasons we like this rotation, you have Matthew Boyd, Jameson Taillon, Shota on 1-year contracts. Let's bolster that. You got this stable projection for 26. You got a stable projection from the positional side for the next 2 years. Add to that. And so I like Amai maybe for 4 or 5 years in advance, the age, the stuff. But I want to win a World Series within the next 3 to 4 years. And the way the game evolves so quickly, I'm willing to take more of that gamble for the value up front, and then you adjust 3-4 years later. But I'm a fan. Front offices think differently, but that's just would be my preferred way forward because you just know what the foundation and you have just a tighter range of outcomes for Cease.
Yeah, we'll talk about it more after this second ad break here. But I think a good premise for our offseason discussions is it does feel like the Cubs, the base is very strong. You have a lot of money coming off the book. You have a potential CBA issue in a year. Does feel like one of those off seasons where like you really, as a big market team, you really should be pushing in a little bit in this situation. Like,
and then it's like, well, where do you push in? That's a
everywhere.
challenge because you got every position locked up.
Yeah.
Let's do the ad break. We'll continue talking about it. Ray Chevrolet, forget one day only. Black Friday is going on all month long at Ray Chevrolet in Fox Lake. Come in today to shop the Black Friday sales event and drive home with 10 to 30% off MSRP on new Chevrolet models, plus no payments for 120 days. Or check out their selection of over 125 vehicles priced under $20,000. With one of Chicago's largest Chevy inventories, you're sure to find the perfect vehicle for you. And as one of the top-selling Chevy dealers in the Midwest, they're able to keep their prices competitive, so you know you'll get a great deal. Plus, Ray's Price Promise lets you shop confidently because the price you see is the price you pay. Go see for yourself. Visit our partner at their convenient location right on Route 12 in Fox Lake, and don't miss out on their Black Friday sales event going on all month long for 10 to 30% off MSRP on new Chevy models. They've been serving the community since 1963. Together, let's drive. Man, I'm so ready to get back to a ball game. Nothing beats walking into Wrigley Field, hearing the crowd, smelling those foods, smelling the hot dogs, the onions, the grilled onions in the back, just being there, but getting tickets. That's the hard part. It's the queues, the logins, watching the price jump right when you're about to check out. Kills me every single time, but I use Game Time. It gives the advantage back to us, the fans. It's super easy. A few taps, you're in, and everything is upfront. Fees included, so the price you see is the price you pay, plus the Game Time guarantee means you're getting 100% authentic tickets on time at the best price. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use code CHGO for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Tap ticket. Go. Download Game Time today.
All right, Brendan, back with you. All right, let's keep going on the notion we were talking about before, pushing in a little bit. Now, granted, like if you've been listening to Brendan and I for any amount of time, really, I feel like anybody that talks about the Cubs, we want them to spend more money. Have you heard that before from anyone?
Really?
Yeah. So, but I do think this offseason in particular represents one where it's not just feeling that in a vacuum as a general, like they're a big market. They bring in some of the most revenue in the league. Their percentage spent on baseball is one of the lowest. Like that's always frustrating. But coming off a year where you get over, those win thresholds that have been kind of holding you down for a few years, you're back in the playoffs, you win a playoff series, but you lose the division to Milwaukee, you lose a division series to Milwaukee, and you have a good amount of young, cost-controlled players who are not breaking the bank on these big contracts. Obviously you stand to lose a big contributor and someone like Kyle Tucker, but like it does feel like an off season where it would obviously be nice for them to push past some of these self-imposed thresholds and limits. It feels like the group right now is not good enough. Of course it's not. The offseason just started. But it's such a stable foundation that it does feel like one of those off seasons that's like, especially ahead of a potential looming work stoppage or, delay, whatever ends up happening with the CBA. Like, you've got a good group. You've got a bunch of money coming off the books. You've got young guys that haven't hit those really massive like arbitration raises yet, or you haven't bought out those years with, team friendly, but still pricier extensions. This feels like one of those spots where it's like, supplement this group and you give yourself a really good chance to have a pretty fruitful season here.
The key word you said, supplement. This is a time to supplement that group. Here's a chart. And what I'm showing here is team positional WAR for guys projected with at least 500 plate appearances. Another way to consider this is starting positional players in the National League. The top 5 teams are as followed: the Braves, the Dodgers, the Mets, the Cubs, and the Padres. Cubs are a top 5 team as it stands now before the offseason has even started in full force in the National League. But what's most interesting about this projection is not just the total number of WAR that they are projected to get, but it's the confidence in that number. The Cubs have the highest floor of any National League team in that team projection. They also have one of the more mediocre ceilings, even though they have that high overall top 5 number. So what does that mean? That means the Cubs have a narrow set of players that are good, but they don't have those elevated top producers. But that floor is super high. It's the best floor in the National League. So the way I think about this, Corey, is you supplement that floor. You leverage that floor. You have $40 million that you are likely capable of spending based on years past before opening day. And if you want to think like, okay, how do I actually make my point about the front office fully spending money and ownership fully spending money? The way to do that is look at that floor, forget the first tier of the luxury tax. You have a chance to spend upwards to 98 wins, 100 wins. You have a chance to secure the likelihood of a playoff spot, a division spot, if you blow past that first tier. So if you're a fan and you're kind of fed up with some of the spending, which I'll raise my hand, yeah, I am. Dating back to 2018, the whole discourse around COVID, I don't really care about the pockets right now. This is being very meatball-y, but right now,
kind of, yeah,
you have a chance to spend upwards to 98 wins because the team has such a high floor.
Now, a question. The chart you showed, that includes defensive value. Yes.
It's driven a lot by defensive value.
Okay. Because like, I do want to clarify that for the listeners. I obviously, if you're listening, you couldn't see the chart, but it's on the YouTube. Does include defensive value. Because when you're first saying that, I'm like, I don't buy that this group has the highest floor of anyone in the National League. If we're talking strictly offense, not offense plus base running plus defense. When it's the full picture, I still don't. I know it's just projections, but I still don't really buy it. I think they have some guys with extreme variability. But yes,
one last tidbit, right? So you talk about variability. The Cubs have also the 3rd tightest variance in that projection. So they have the top 5 overall projection. They have the highest floor of that projection and the 3rd tightest variance around that group of 7 guys with projections over 500 plate appearances. So you're talking about, oh, well, he doesn't feel like it. It feels a little shaky. You can't really say that. It becomes a conversation of you specifically, how you value defense and projecting value.
Sure. Okay. But I do think, just useful to point that out. But Ed also doesn't factor in, the projections once the Dodgers have Kyle Tucker and Alex Bregman. And so it'll change a little bit. And, 5 different guys coming from Japan. I'm blanking on who it was, but I know one of the guys that was just posted from Japan was having dinner with Yamamoto the other
Yeah, I
night.
saw
So
that. That
already
was
just draw that one up.
sushi spot. Yeah,
They're not even
goodbye.
trying at this point. Just like, yeah, just sign the deal. It's done. All right.
Yeah.
We don't need to pretend.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And so like, I think when we're talking about like pushing in and why this is like, we always want them to do that, but why in this offseason or at this moment, like, I think like at least one way to illustrate that is like, you think about like going into the 2023 season, like what that group needed to do to put themselves in a conversation of chasing a wild card spot, which they end up doing. But like even like spending on Bellinger or Stroman or the other moves that they make, when you're looking at like reasonable projections, that's still only maybe pushing them up against that like bottom wild card window. And you needed a bunch to go right to get there. This group, you feel like the floor is already at a point. The point is to suggest that there's going to be some off seasons where even if we put together a plan of here's how they could spend $75 million on free agents or acquisitions that get added to the payroll, there's just no reasonable way, even with those $75 million, that puts them in contention with the Brewers for the top of the National League Central. That's not this offseason. If they spent a bunch of money, you'd look at this group and say this reasonably can get to a position where they are one of the best teams in the National League. And you can't do that if the floor and the foundation is not already there. And so it's not to suggest that this group is like so good, like they only need a couple minor moves and they're the best team in the National League. But like the floor is strong in a sense where if you really make a strong, concerted effort to continue making it better, you're not going from okay to maybe a fringe playoff team. You're going from a fringe to secure playoff team to a lock to be at the top of, getting a bye. And of course, best laid plans, things go awry. But when you're talking about like that comfortability, they're starting from a place now that they can get there reasonably. And there's plenty of off seasons where you would have to say, look, they could spend $150 million. They're not winning 95 games,
Exactly. That's why in years past, if you've been listening to Corey and I since, 22, then you've heard us talk about extremes. I want to play the extremes. You play Christopher Morel in third base in 22, 23, right? I want to see the extremes. I'm not talking about extremes anymore because when I talked about extremes then, our floor was too low. So I needed to push that ceiling. When I talked about extremes,
you had to shoot for the moon.
I got to shoot for it. But because now we have the higher floor, no. I'm going to be a little bit more cautious in my moves. So when I talk about a Mai versus Cease, well, the floor is so high for the next year or 2 years, I may want to be just a little bit more conservative and spend a little bit more money to shore up those confident wins in the next 2 years. It's a different discussion than you and I have had in the past couple of years. And it's driven in part because Shaw had a great second half. PCA had a phenomenal year, 2 years now in bulk, providing value defensively in the offense last year. You've seen Michael Busch have 1,000+ plate appearances, performing well. And those projections in 23 with Seiya Suzuki, Seiya's projected as a 2-WAR guy. He's not even the top of this list anymore because you have Dansby, Nico, and those guys elevating forward. It is a different discussion, Corey.
Yeah. So I think from, obviously we talked about pitching. I load up on pitching. You need that other top of the rotation arm, a guy that's slotting into your, 1 to 2 slots, I think, in the rotation, somewhere in there. But from a position player perspective, where do we look at as those areas where you would identify?
That's the challenge, right? So I was going to ask you that next. I listed 7 guys with projections over 500 plate appearances with an average WAR of 3. So we want to push a little bit more chips in. How do you do that when you have every position seemingly filled up other than right field or DH? How do you actually do that? It does seem challenging. And in fact, unlikely they're going to even put forth significant money on the positional side.
Oh, yeah. So I think those areas would be represented in, do you find someone to platoon with someone like Matt Shaw? Do you find someone, look, there's going to be talk about Bregman again. The front office was interested in him, whether it's something they seriously pursue or not. We're going to see, even if it's just made up rumors. I do think that conversation is at least part of it. Hitters coming over from the MPB. Do you look at someone to not necessarily replace Matt Shaw, but turn Matt Shaw into more of a super utility guy? A la, as we've talked about before, like 2016 Javi Baez, someone who's playing all over the place. Even someone like Ben Zobrist, who we saw playing a million different positions.
What year was that?
2016. Ben Zobrist did a lot, but 2016 is probably what you're talking about.
When they won the World Series, right?
The Cubs did, yeah.
Oh, okay. Just making sure.
Yeah. And I guess, it sounds like we're going to get some reunions and celebrations for that. CubsCon or next season, et cetera. Yeah. So you can look forward to Brendan and I being insufferable about that, probably along with the rest of the Cubs fan base. I don't think we're unique
forever.
Michael Busch, obviously, we saw him not necessarily getting all those starts against left-handed pitchers. His numbers not as good, sometimes drastically bad against left-handed pitchers. Do they look at something that supplements that maybe is not a 40-year-old veteran you're taking off the bench? Other than that, it does, as you said, do you look at getting someone? There's, I know a lot of people are going to talk about, a reunion with Kyle. Would the Cubs spend on someone who's going to end up being a full-time DH? It doesn't seem like something I can anticipate them doing. But again, when you're talking about ways to improve it, like there's only so many ways. I do think it doesn't get where we're talking about, but even just starting, we talked about this a lot, like the first half of the year, like when you were pretty consistently rocking a bench that was like Gage Workman and John Birdie and Vidal Brujan. And at least for the first couple months, Turner wasn't even hitting left-handed pitching. Like if you can improve upon that, that's a pretty good start. So I think even like if that's a role that Ballesteros is playing, if you want Owen Casey doing that, it's not a lot of playing time probably. But hopefully you can at least improve upon like the depth that you're utilizing at all times. But yeah, I mean, I would like to see them do any of those things. If it is someone else starting at third base or someone who's mixing in at third base and guys are moving around, like that's a type of aggressive I would like to see them go for. Again, look, when we talk about the money, like I think the way you laid it out in the beginning is likely what happens. I think they stay with that pillow under that first tier, like until they act otherwise. That's how I would operate. That's just the reality that I think we live in, which is a mistake. It's always going to be a mistake, but that's just what they've done. So until they act differently, I think we have to take them at their actions, not necessarily their vague words and things like that. But I would go for it. And I'm going to continue to bang the drum. I feel like I say this every episode. Like, I don't expect them to re-sign Kyle Tucker. I understand that a lot of fans probably left with a bad taste after the injuries and the second half performance. But that first half performance and even the on-base percentage, a lot of the time when he was hurt, is really not easy to replace. No. And right now, unless somebody takes a huge step, and like Michael Busch was great last year, but a drop off in that second half. He was still a good player in the second half, still above league average. But I think he had like a 140 something, 150 something close in the first half. That it was closer to 112 in the second half, right?
Still good.
Like still good. But like if it's
that's
not
the argument
at that
against
top
it.
level, without someone like Tucker, even though it wasn't guaranteed for Tucker last year, like we go back to the conversations we've had previously. Where is that star potential? And you got a little bit. Go ahead.
Do you need it? Do you need the star potential now?
Yeah.
That's the question. That's the crux of the question, though.
No, yes. The answer is yes.
But you're gonna have folks, and I guarantee you're gonna have executives talk about confidence in their overall group. And the holes that we talked about in years past at third base and first base are filled up by Shaw and Bush. PCA has been an established everyday center fielder. Those holes no longer exist. So consolidating that war to make up for your voids is not the same context anymore. That's represented in the higher floor. So the pushback from me to you is, well, do you need that star? Because very clearly the Cubs have a top positional group without that star right now.
My answer is yes. I think, look, like I understand it. Like
You
I
get it
believe
though,
in a lot
right?
of these players, but I think some of this, to me, it just isn't accounting enough for the potential variability in someone like Shaw. Are you getting that first half? Are you getting that second half? And we talk about
Does it
Bregman,
matter
right? Like,
though, right? Because the second half,
well, but
hold on, just one last point. And I know it's good, it's the good devil's advocate, but there was a comment here, Shaw, great second half, question mark, that's a stretch. Shaw had the most home runs as a third baseman in the National League as a
I
third
think he had a
baseman.
130 WRC plus.
He was one of the best. He was the
Better than Bregman.
best offensive hitter in the National League in the second half. And he was playing top tier defense. So great second half. That's a stretch. No, it is
But
not.
he was, well, yeah, no. I agree with that. But he was bad in the first half.
So then it goes back to the point
But
of
he's
what
a
Jed was talking.
23-year-old rookie.
It goes
so,
back to the point Jed was talking about, the shape of a season, the shape
Sure.
of value, and timing it up when maybe the postseason comes around. Isaiah hits 5 home runs in 3 days. That would be the pushback I'm telling you, right?
Sure. But so again, like, I think on the whole, I believe in the positional group. I expressed the concern with like not having Kyle Tucker. I think last week I expressed the concern, like probably unlikely to get a 1,700 OPS out of Carson Kelly for the first 2 months next year. I hope he proves me wrong, but like that just
Well,
seems.
the next iteration is he bats lefty like Barry Bonds next year, and then
Great.
he'll be fine.
I think the preemptive concern I would have with not supplementing, at least, even if it's not necessarily on Tucker's level, but in a significant way, even if it's spread around in supplemental guys on the offense, is Shaw, despite the good second half, is still 23 years old, has gone through a lot of adjustments, and I would hesitate to project him only near that higher end. And I'm not saying you're doing that or the systems are doing that. PCA obviously had a big drop off in that second half. Like Michael Bush, an excellent overall player, and I'm thrilled to have him, one of the better first basemen in the league for the last couple years. But there is a big difference in what he did in that first half and expecting him or thinking that he's going to put up that versus what he did in that second half. And again, I know you're going to talk about the shape. It's the full scope of things.
Of course.
But I just think as it stands, this offense has the potential to bottom out a little bit. And I would like to see them not. I'll put it this way. I will stand on the business that letting Tucker go and not replacing that, even in a marginal way, is a major risk that I'm not comfortable with. And to our discussion about like taking this foundation and really pushing it, I think it's a mistake. I think it's a little wasteful of the opportunity that they have. And like expecting Ballesteros or Casey or even a guy like Shaw to kind of pick up that slack as such young players, despite my belief in them. And I've said repeatedly, like what Shaw did in 2025 is extraordinarily impressive. And like, if you weren't pleased with that or like impressed by a 23-year-old getting sent down, coming back up, working through 5 different changes to his swing and putting up those numbers in the second half, growing incredibly at third base as a positional defender, like I feel all of that, but I just think that there's a lot of risk there that you're baking in. Ian Happ, and a good overall shape guy, but has those months where he just is not like as. So I don't. Before I throw it back to you, I don't want that to get construed as like concern necessarily with the offense, but I think we're trying to attack the question of like, are we comfortable with it right now? or do they need to make significant additions? And I think they can live without getting exactly Kyle Tucker back. I do just think it would be a mistake to not try to push it a little more to that next level and just give some of these guys, Shaw included, even like Bush, a little softer landing if they don't go out and hit that like absolute top projection or past performance level that we've seen from them. And I hope that like overall makes sense.
It makes sense. We are on the same page, but for different reasons. And
okay.
your reason I actually disagree with a little bit. Where I disagree specifically is the value you discuss with Shaw, PCA, and the shape of their offense. And you believe this, I know, but the pushback there is, well, that's why their defense is so valuable, because it provides that pillow should their offense be poor. Where we're on the same page and where ultimately I agree with you is they should spend because of that defensive floor and that potential offense. So I look at this team right now, and they're probably, by all accounts, going to be a 91, 92 win team on paper going into opening day with this current group. I look at this, and the question I ask myself is, okay, what ads are available to get to 98 wins? I want to get to 98 wins. It's always been my number, 98 wins. The reason for that is I want to create this massive pillow where if you have 2 injuries, we're still going to make the playoffs. That's how I fan.
Well, and unfortunately, we have to bake in that Milwaukee might win 40 games in a row now every year, and we have to account for that. So
probably. But I look at the spending discussion. I look at this as a great opportunity. I think, okay, well, we made the playoffs last year with this and that poor second half. You had massive leaps because of the defensive value from those guys. I want to spend on Schwarber. I want to spend and take some risk and bolster that offense because the base is so good. I want to go from 92 to 94. I want to spend another 20 million to get 2 more wins in Amai or Cease. I want to go from 94 to 96. To hell with it. I want to spend 15 million on a back end reliever. I'm not done yet. I want to get 1 more starter, and I want to get a platoon bat, and I want to blow past that first tier of the luxury tax. I want 98 wins. I want 5 home games at Wrigley Field. I want to make as much money as possible, and that's my risk. That's how I would approach this. And you have an opportunity for the first time, I feel like, where you have the ability and the rationale to blow past that first tier. And I get it. The ownership is reluctant to do it. They see idiots like you and me talk about the Cubs and always going to these games no matter what, right? I understand it. But we can still have the opportunity to reach that level if there is some willingness to take that risk past the first tier.
Yeah, look, I mean, we talk about it all the time. Part of the, you want your young guys to succeed. Like, of course, any team wants young guys that are cheaper, like playing for major league minimums or first year arbitration, things like that. Everybody wants that. But part of the reason that it's so valuable is because it lets you it should let you spend around it.
This is why you do it.
Yes. When you're getting the performance like this from PCA and Matt Shaw and Michael Bush and Cade Horton, like even someone like Justin Steele, like it should be the type of thing that's giving you the nudge to push it in.
Let me paint you a picture. You ready for this? I'm going to paint you a picture. It's a warm, early July afternoon. Cubs have their 10-year reunion. John Lester is out there on the mound, sunglasses on, pumping up the crowd. He throws a first pitch to none other than the other lefty, Justin Steele, at home plate. You know who's DHing that day? Kyle Schwarber. Kyle Schwarber taking pictures with his ring with the 10-year reunion guys. You know who's actually starting that game? It's not Justin Steele. It's booming Jake Arrieta like ace, Cade Horton. You know who's warming up in the bullpen, just getting his cup of coffee? Jackson Wiggins. That's the picture I want. By the way, the Cubs are 30 games above 500. We're steamrolling through the division.
And then, well, wait, to finish it off, Schwarbs hits a walk-off homer.
That's right.
To left. This time, Rizzo catches it in the bleachers.
Look at that. Rizzo catches it. And, you have maybe John Lackey behind him and the rest of the crew. That's the image I want.
They just sign Akamoto. They sign Imai. They sign Schwarber. Sign Pete Alonso, too. And Dylan Cease. And, you just become the new Dodgers that everybody hates. And that's the vibe. right?
We can dream, right?
We can dream. And that's all it is. It's a dream. But
All
either
right.
way, as we wrap up here, like, I do think it does set up a very interesting offseason. The Cubs have a very good base, and they have at least some room to work with, even if they're sticking to their, kind of previous thresholds. If they decide to go past it, they have a ton to work with. But either way, it sets up a very interesting offseason where the Cubs are looking to take that next step from 2025. So Brendan and I will be off next week as it is Thanksgiving. So enjoy your holiday if you observe, or if you just have work off or enjoying the weekend. Enjoy. We'll be back with you in a couple weeks. Luke, Joey, Justin will have you earlier in the week. But keep it tuned to CHGO Cubs. Anything happens, we will hop on for an emergency podcast, cover the breaking news, and we'll have you through the whole offseason, whatever Jed and company decide to do. So as always, we appreciate you tuning in, appreciate your support, and as always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.